So today is my May Kids Book of the Month. So for those of you that have been around for a little while, you're probably familiar with this series. Basically, once a month, in the middle of the month roughly, I do a video where I talk about different kids' books. Mostly I have been talking about kids' picture books, although I may talk about chapter books and some middle grade as well. The reason for this is because, for those of you that don't know, I'm a primary school teacher and an early childhood educator, and literacy is an important part of early childhood educating, and I think that literacy is really, really important. As you probably know, because I have a booktube channel, I think books in general are really important and a really big part of my life. So I want to share some books that I think are really fantastic for younger readers and to encourage children to read. So today I am going to be talking about a few books that deal a bit more with diversity. So this was inspired by the book Differenter by Jyoti Gupta and Taranam Pastrika. So this is a book, it says an activity book about skin colour. This was very kindly sent to me by my friend Alison because she heard about this book and thought that this sounded like a really important book to get into the hands of educators. So she sent this to myself and another friend of ours, Alicia, who is also an early childhood educator. It is what it says it is. It is an activity book that talks about skin colour. So it is looking at different ways in which skin colour affects children's lives. So we talk about our skin and its colour. So talking about what skin is, what its function is, and how it will be different thicknesses and colours and why that is. Talking about how we all are a mix of different skin colours. Then it goes into melanin and the production of melanin and how that changes skin colour. So there's lots of different little suggestions of different activities that children can do to explore this further and to think about this further. So for example, can you find the thumbprint closest to your skin colour? So on this page here, can you write their name under it? So family members' name under it. Draw their face on it. Then we have go for a nature walk and collect 4 to 5 leaves of different shapes and sizes. Did you notice dark, light and in between tones of green? Learn the names of the leaves and the different shades of green. So there's lots of different activities that children can do as they go through this book, or as part of some of the different things that are talked about in this book, to explore further and to really delve into different aspects of what they're talking about. Yeah, I just think this is a really, really great book. It's really great in the way that it explores all different aspects of culture and cultural norms. So we have something to do with food and whether food is part of a culture. How do we talk about differences? So good ways and bad ways to discuss differences, particularly with children. Why are grown-ups sometimes mean to each other? So talking about racism, talking about how we can change things, make things better, and yeah, like I said, different activities around that. So I have not actually read this or worked with this with a class as of yet because I am currently not teaching and I only just got this about a week or so ago. But I do think this would be a fantastic resource to use in a classroom. I think it would also be a fantastic resource to use at home. I think that it is great for any child. I don't think that you would need to make sure that they were a particular age, although it is a picture book aimed at younger children, so this might be a good place to start when they are sort of 6, 7, 8, and then you can move up into different books as they grow and learn and become more competent readers. I particularly really appreciate the fact that it has all the activity suggestions, because simply reading something oftentimes isn't enough to really get everything out of what the book is trying to say, which is why so many people annotate books. It's why those of us who are teachers choose to use books as a springboard for different lessons. So I love the fact that they have made suggestions of activities that will connect those children to the concepts that they're exploring. I also really like the cover. I like the way that it has so many different pictures of different people. I like that it is an own voices book, so this is not a white person like myself talking about something that we haven't experienced, so I think that's really important as well. The next book that I want to show you is actually an example of a white woman talking about this sort of thing, but this is Whoever You Are by Mem Fox. This is a bit more of a sort of younger children, so more sort of your 3-4-year-olds, and it talks about the fact that there are differences, there are different people from different parts of the world who have different cultures, but it's much more simplistic, it's much more going through and just telling that information and just giving different pictures that illustrate that. So this would be something that would be a companion to this. So this might be your starting point where you would read that, and then you might explore this one a bit further because this has the activities and different things to sort of continue with the learning. So this is still a great book. This is still a really lovely little picture book. The illustrator is Leslie Staub, and she does some absolutely beautiful pictures. This one is talking about how, you know, we're all similar, we're all different, but we're all similar, and we do things to hurt each other, or we do things to be kind to each other. So it's talking about, like I said, the fact that we are different but similar at the same time. So I do think this is a fantastic book as well. This is a great resource. This is an excellent starting point, but this is something that would really take it a lot further. So those are the two books in particular that I wanted to show you to do with thinking about racism and differences in our society. And the next two books are books that are more thinking about different cultures and thinking about different things that happen in our society. So the first one is Migrants by Issa Watanabe. This one is actually entirely a picture book, and I think these pictures are just absolutely beautiful. So this is a book that tells the story through pictures, and it shows what can happen to a society and to a people when they are in a position where they are forced to leave their home. So it's to do with migration, immigration, and to do with the situation for refugees. So for example, you see here the animals are in the forest, but they have to have all of their pots and pans, so they're obviously moving, and it does imply, you can, from the downturn of their heads and the sad faces, it does imply that they're not in a situation they would necessarily choose to be in, and there is some tragedy at the end, so things don't go according to plan. So I really appreciate this on a number of levels. First of all, from the same perspective as the two books I just spoke to you about, it is looking at something that is happening in our world, in our society, to do with refugees and the situation for refugees throughout the world, in Australia in particular, if you happen to be in Australia, but throughout the world, and talking about and having a look at that and look at how it affects individuals. So I think it's really important from that perspective, but I also think that it's fantastic from a literacy perspective, because although obviously reading is very important and learning to read is very important, being literate is very important in our society, I think this is great because it allows you to explore art as a different medium, and it allows you to explore images as a way of expressing ideas and expressing story, and that's a really important part of literacy for early readers, and making those connections between what they see and then what they read, and images really help them to develop that understanding. But also from the perspective of culture and the way that we view culture and entertainment, we've been talking quite a bit over Twitter and whatnot for the last while about Shadow and Bone, and it being adapted into a television program, and that will bring a new group of people to watch and to experience that and to enjoy that, which may then in turn bring a new group of people into reading, because it's based on a book. So there are lots of different ways to view things, there are lots of different ways to learn things, there are lots of different ways to experience elements of culture and story, and all of these things that make us humans. So I think that's really important from that perspective, because it doesn't just focus on learning to read and the actual physics of learning to read and the actual activity of code breaking and making understanding letters and all of that, but it focuses more on what's behind what's being said, what is actually being expressed. So yeah, I think this is just fantastic, absolutely brilliant. So Migrants by Isa Watanabe. It is created or published by Gecko Press, so I definitely would look into that. And then the final book that I want to talk to you about is more to do with learning different points of view and different perspectives and different versions of history. So that is Young Dark Emu, A Truer History by Bruce Pascoe. So at the moment I'm actually listening to the adult version of this, Dark Emu, and then this has been, the book Dark Emu has been then adapted into a young reader. So this is not a picture book in the same way that some of these other books are picture books. This is a much more text-heavy information book. So this would be a good resource still for younger readers, but it isn't something that they would sit down and be read to or read to you. This is more something that you would have in a classroom or in a bedroom or what have you, that can be referred to for information purposes. So even up to probably even grade 7, I would say this would be appropriate for. So Dark Emu is, like I said, a truer history of colonization in Australia, and to do with facts about Indigenous Australians and the first inhabitants of Australia that has been swept under the rug or completely ignored deliberately in order to further the colonisation of Australia and in order to prop up the myth of terra nullius, which is the idea that Australia was uninhabited. And so that was the reasoning behind why Europeans were able to take over Australia, because it wasn't inhabited, even though obviously it was. So I think this is a really important, in general, I mean, I don't think you have to be Australian in order for this to be something that is worth a read and worth knowing about and important in terms of understanding the history of the world. But I definitely think this is a really good resource for classrooms and homes of young children living in Australia to have. So I definitely highly recommend this one. This is another one that I haven't had for very long, so I haven't actually, in fact I haven't had most of these for very long, so I haven't actually had a chance to use most of these in a classroom, but I would definitely recommend. I do think that this is a really important topics to introduce to classes and to have children think about. So yeah, definitely highly recommend all of these books, particularly these 3. I do still think that Mem Fox's Wherever You Are is a great resource, is a great book, and the intention is definitely to be more inclusive, but I do think that these 3 are much deeper books and would be definitely important to have in a classroom, or like I said, a private home. So anyway, that is this book of the month video for May. Please do comment below if you have any thoughts about any of these books that I've talked about. I will put in some information about where to get a hold of these books as well, because I do think, like I said, they're really important books to get a hold of in the description below. But if you want any more information, please do comment. This one I just actually wanted to also say, was published by Magabala Books. Now, Magabala Books, it says on the internet that it is the leading Indigenous publishing house, which, you know, there are other Indigenous publishing houses, so I wouldn't necessarily, leading or not, it is an Indigenous Australian publishing house. It is owned and led by Aboriginal people and people from the Torres Straits. So I do think that that is something that's really fantastic. I think that's a publishing house that's I highly recommend. I've got a few books published by Magabala at the moment, so I would highly recommend, particularly, as I've said, if you live in Australia. But otherwise, if you don't, I would highly recommend looking into that publishing house. It's an independent Indigenous Australian publishing house, which I think is just really super important and fantastic. So just wanted to let you know about that. So yeah, that's it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.